in post. Okay, so now I'm recording also, as well as streaming, so hopefully this will actually work correctly. This is only the second time I've done anything like this ever, so apologies right now for how unprofessional this is going to be. Basically how I guess this is going to work is you guys both told me a couple things you'd like me to focus on in the stream today, so I'm going to try and cover those topics as best as I can. I don't exactly talk a whole lot, so I'm expecting that I'm going to stutter and a whole lot. So just bear with me for that. If you have any questions about anything I'm saying, or just any questions in general, just feel free to type it in the chat and interrupt what I'm saying, and we'll go off on a little tangent. That's kind of how I do things anyway, so you're not hurting my feelings, I guess. So I guess we'll just go ahead and go. I don't remember who exactly asked for what, but I remember the three things that were asked. One was how to do torsos. One was how I do expressions on my characters. And one was how I do lighting in low light situations. So I'll probably cover them in that order, I guess, since, how to do torsos won't take very long. How I do expressions, I'm not even sure how to teach that, but I can demonstrate it. So that'll probably take a little while longer, and this will probably take, ages. So I hope you guys are prepared to spend ages in the stream. But, moving on, I guess. Torsos themselves are pretty easy. And it's kind of a thing that as long, with just about whatever you're going to be drawing. Oh yes, Chibi, you're just wrecking me here. With whatever you draw, if it's going to be humans or anthro stuff or, whatever, most of the time, torsos kind of follow the same rules. And I drew a head there because I kind of always start with the head. That's kind of a mental block I have, I guess. But, it's just something that helps me if I start at the top and I can just kind of build everything downwards to the bottom. That's what helps me keep things straight. But in essence, really, the torso itself is just kind of a slight trapezoid shape. It's a bit wider at the top for the shoulders, and it gets a little bit narrower as you go to where the stomach and waist are. And then underneath it is like the hip box, which is shaped exactly the opposite. But really, that's kind of it if you're thinking in 2 dimensions. But you're not going to get very far if all you're doing is just drawing people straight on. It's going to look kind of boring, and people are going to get bored of looking at your stuff, and you're going to get bored of drawing that stuff. So that's not really what we want to do. But thinking about that trapezoid shape in 3 dimensions, things get a little bit more interesting. If we have kind of the top line here, the bottom line here, then that trapezoid shape, and then if we kind of extend it backwards a little bit, you get a 3-dimensional box instead of a 2-dimensional box. And if we put hip box at the bottom, kind of have the same thing. One thing to note is that it's not just a straight box. Like if we look at it from the side, the hip or the chest is not going to look like this. It's going to have a bit of a curve to it. If we're talking about male or female, the chest kind of protrudes a little bit. You're not going to see a whole lot of people with chests that do this. Unless they're slouching, I guess. That might work. If you got somebody doing this. But that's a little bit different. The normal shape of a torso is probably going to be this. And then you can bend that shape to do a whole lot of stuff if you want. But the normal resting shape, I suppose, of the torso would be kind of like this. And this circle here is about where the arms are supposed to connect. If we think about the back side of the shape here, that looks kind of right, but it's also very wooden and robotic almost, and that's just not how humans are really built. So the real fun in drawing humanoid forms, I guess I'm assuming that's what you were talking about, Manika, when you were asking, because you said you didn't really have a whole lot of interest in drawing ponies, so that's I just assumed things. Okay, cool. But kind of the fun thing about drawing people is that they are very rarely just straight lines. There's a whole lot of curves, and that's what makes them interesting. Excuse me. So basically, the task is kind of to take the box shape that you've got and find out where all the curves are, and kind of follow that and use that to build the person that you're trying to draw. And for that, really all I can really say there is just to study and like look up anatomy things if you can, because knowing where the muscles and stuff are will help you in the long run. But really, for the short run, just doing studies of photos of people will kind of help you figure out where things are. Like, I'm still very much not good at this. Drawing humans is something I haven't seriously done in a long time. Like, there were those sketches I did this morning, but that's something I'm trying to work my way back into, because that's something I have a lot of fun with. Oops. Almost knocked something over. Humans and anthros. Yeah, for the most part, well, at least in my view of it, anthros tend to be just, they tend to be very humanoid. I'm kind of, I'm sure there's a lot of anthro artists that would get mad at me for just, drawing a fox head and then drawing a human body down below it. But that's what a lot of people do, actually, so I don't know. But, whoops. This is my original character, don't steal him. But when you're talking about anthros and furries, there's kind of like that sliding scale of how furry you want to go with, not furry at all, slightly furry, extremely furry, dangerously furry. And actually, I don't know, there's a guy named Shepard who kind of does, he does this with ponies, but he has like a sliding scale where on one end he has a human version of the character, and it's just a straight up human version of the character. And then on the other end, he has just a pony version of the character. And then in between, he's got a kind of sliding scale of human to horse. And that's kind of interesting. But I guess the point I was making was that you can kind of make your own rules with how human and how animal you want to go there. I kind of tend to keep it pretty humanoid. Maybe change the hands up or how the legs work, depending on what animal I'm drawing. Like, I have a character, Dorothy, for instance, who's a deer. And she's basically just, kind of deer-ish face. And then basically a human body. And then I'm trying to do I think it's called digitigrade, or I do not remember, the legs that go like this. I'm trying to learn how to do those on her, because those are the kind of legs that deer have, and I kind of wanted her to be more deery, I guess. The extra knees, basically, yeah. Like there's a knee here, and then the leg bends backwards some. Whoops. And then there's a backwards knee here, and the whole leg kind of does this, and then you've got weird deer hooves on the end here. Deer hooves are kind of weird. They are not horse hooves like I am used to. But I guess my problem with, like I've tried to do these with Dorothy especially, and with, I have a satyr character. I have no idea how to pronounce that word. Half human, half goat. Uh, that she has these kind of legs as well. And my problem with doing these is that the legs always either end up looking way too short, or the character just kind of looks like they're slouching. And I'm actually doing pretty well here. This kind of looks almost alright. Yeah, Melanie. I was talking about Melanie. That's incredibly wrong. So yeah, something like that is kind of how things would work. Check it out, it's Dorothy. Huzzah. Uh, yeah, I guess the point I was making there is that the stuff I'm telling you is not just applicable to humans, but it's also applicable to furry stuff as well. Depending on if you're going for the more humanoid furries. If you're going for a more animal type furry, then I guess you just have to figure out how the animal you're drawing looks and try to apply that to a more humanoid form, I guess. That's not something I really have a whole lot of experience with. Yeah, if you're sticking towards humanoid forms, Manico, then you've got a lot to work with, which makes you kind of lucky. You just find human poses that look good to you. One thing I'd recommend, since you said you're kind of starting out, is to find reference images and just trace over them. Like, figure out where the blocks are that make up the torso, and then the hips, and then the legs, and try to figure out how that works on the photo you've got. And if you can figure out how it works on the photo, how actual people are moving and stuff like that, then that'll help you a lot when you go to make your own poses. That's something I always recommend to people. Well, if you have two people telling you to do it, it's probably a good idea. I promise I'm not secretly in league with him, and we're not telling you the same things to screw you up or anything. But Alloy does humans a lot. So, and most of the humans he does that I've seen look very well put together. So I'd say you're pretty safe with taking his advice. I don't even know what I'm really drawing here. Yeah. But I guess one of the biggest things about learning in general, and this will apply to you right now and forever, basically, is that you're going to do things wrong. And when you do things wrong, you can't really beat yourself up about it. You just gotta either take it to somebody who does know what they're doing and ask what you did wrong, or learn yourself what you did wrong. But basically, don't let screwing things up get you down, because it's going to happen, and that's how you learn, is by screwing up. Like, I'm probably screwing up all over this page and don't even realize it yet. But that's kind of fun, actually, is figuring out what you're doing wrong and how to make it better. But I guess that's probably all I have to say on torsos, unless you've got any other questions on the subject or related subjects. Oh, cool. I kind of want to see your doodles when we're done. That sounds like fun. Uh, but I guess if we're done talking about that subject, we'll go ahead and make a new thing for the next subject, which I was going to talk about. Whoop, not that. Expressions. And this is something that I'm not really sure how to teach with words. One thing that I can tell you is that kind of the root of expressions, I'm going to be using a human face again, but this is kind of a universal rule. So if you're drawing ponies or anthros or whatever, kind of the same thing will always apply. But the root of expressions is basically in the mouth and in the eyes. And you could draw just these two features of the face differently, and you'd have a completely different expression. This is if we're only talking about the head, I guess. But eyebrow position has a lot to do with things. The cheeks can also kind of help, but I wouldn't say they're the main things. I think, contrary to the advice I gave you earlier about looking to real life for references on how these things work, you're probably best off looking at cartoons to figure out how expressions work, because cartoons are very good at exaggerating things for the sake of expression, and that's just seems like the easiest way to figure things out. Whoops. My Firefox might be screwing up. But one thing you can do is you can find a bunch of these everywhere online. I actually can't drop a link right now. Actually, I have no idea of knowing if I'm still alive or not. Technical difficulties, one moment. This is slightly embarrassing. The chat window is dead, so I can't see you guys. So I don't know if I actually am streaming correctly or not. Give me like 2 seconds. Then probably another 2 seconds after that. Oh, we see and hear everything. That's slightly creepy, but I'm glad to know that. But I would still rather have Firefox up on my end so that I can see you guys in the chat room. Chibi Biscuit knows all. Hey, okay. So, we're back. I have the chat back. And now I can drop a link to the thing that I'm using. That's just the one that I'm using right now. I'm sure if you just put in expressions challenge to Google, you'll find a bunch of these kind of little things you can fill out for yourself. But I'll probably fill out a couple of these here so I can hopefully demonstrate my point. Whoops. These are ridiculously small. I don't understand how they expect you to draw on those tiny, tiny boxes. But if I'm going to draw a sad character would be kind of uplifted eyebrows and a frowny mouth. A happy character would obviously have a smile. Kind of neutral eyebrows, I guess. Yeah, part of the challenge is figuring out how to draw on the grain of rice that they provide you for each of these boxes. I'm just wondering if I got a bad image on Google, maybe. Like I got a lower resolution thing, and that's not what the original challenge image was supposed to be. The angry would be eyes would be angry eyebrows and a frowny face. But I mean, the thing is, with all these three characters, really the only thing that's moved is the eyebrows and the mouth. And if that's all you're doing, if like this is useful for comics and stuff and just headshots, I guess. But one of the fun things about drawing is that you can use that using body language helps a lot to sell an emotion. Like if I wanted to draw someone being happy, I might draw them with their this is supposed to be kind of a dancing thing, but I don't know if that's actually working. But I mean, that looks a lot happier to me than just this does. That's pretty happy. He looks like a guy who just got a solid B+ on his exam. But this looks like somebody who's just really ready to party because something great happened. I still have no idea what I was planning on doing with these hands. He is dancing like an Egyptian, because that's what some people do when they're happy, and we shouldn't judge. But if you want to draw someone who's sad, you'd kind of draw somebody all slouching over. And he looks super sad. He also looks like he has a bad hunchback. But, That's somebody who looks way sadder than just this guy. But I guess my point there again is to, yeah, that's me right now. I'm super sad. There's no season 6. Uh, but I guess my advice there again is to look at cartoons, especially like older cartoons. I think, or cartoon movies, especially something with, ooh, excuse me, something with a lot of movement to them, are usually really good for being able to kind of put together body language and figure out how that can show emotion better. A lot of stuff, if you can find animation students, like student films and stuff, those are usually really good places to work because that's the kind of stuff that they're graded on. So that's the kind of thing they need. They're probably doing. They're keeping in mind especially how to do that kind of thing there because that's part of their grade. Uh, if you're just watching a show on TV or something, that might not necessarily be something that they keep in mind, which is something that they should keep in mind, but that might not necessarily be the thing on their mind. So I don't know, is there any related questions to any of this? Well, I sketched this really angry dude. Okay, I actually have no idea what's going on there. But he looks very angry. Like he's very angry at you in specific. What did you do to him? Did you eat his last cookie out of the fridge? But yeah, there's that, I guess. Uh, the other big thing I was going to work on was low light lighting, I believe. Yeah. Actually, yeah, let's go ahead and make something for this. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to draw a horse because horses are really easy and they don't take a whole lot of time. Whoops. Let's go ahead and do this. This is going to be Applejack because I like drawing Applejack. Actually, no, forget that. It's going to be Mayor Mayor because I like Mayor Mayor a lot. Well, thank you. Whoops, let's nostrils. That's probably not quite correct, but we'll go with it. Uh, Go ahead and ink it because inking makes things way easier for me to color because I have ways to cheat, and I like. And art is really all about cheating, which I say in jest, but it is also kind of true. Uh, for me, at least, digital art has become a lot of kind of finding ways to make things easier on myself. Because I used to, I mean, when I started out drawing on paper, and I had no digital cheats I could pull for that, and it kind of worked. I still draw on paper from times, uh, and there have been times when I've been drawing on paper and I've made a mistake and I have reached for the Control Z key to undo my mistake, and I can't because this is the real world. But what was my point? Oh yeah, my point is that I had a lot of people tell me when I started out drawing digitally, I would just use all the things that I knew from drawing traditionally. Pardon me. I would use as few layers as possible. I would color everything manually. I would shade everything manually. Uh, because that's just what I knew. And there's times still today when I'm drawing that I like to use as few layers as possible and color everything manually and not use any layer tricks or anything because that's still fun to me. But it was a legit habit I had for a long time, and it was something that I kind of had to break myself out of. A couple of my friends that I really respected kind of said, "You've got tools here, and there's no shame in learning how to use your tools." And I think that kind of helped me a lot because now I use these tools all the time. But what I'm doing here is I'm making sure my lines are all closed in, that they all there's not any gaps or anything in them, because that's going to help me do my flat coloring here in a second very quickly, and that's one of the cheats / tools that I've learned to use. And I will cover it here in a second once I have a horse to color. But when I'm sketching around and stuff, and if I know I'm not going to be coloring anything, then sometimes I'll just, I won't take too much care in my lines, and I'll just, where they fall, they fall, and that's just how it's going to be. But if I know I'm going to color something, if I know ahead of time I'm going to color something, then I take care to make sure that, that all my lines meet up and that they're fairly clean. And yeah, that doesn't look great, honestly, but it'll work for what I'm going to talk about. There we go. But we've got all our lines are on one layer. So if you end up doing line art on several layers, which a lot of people do, and I'll do a little bit here for the sake of showing that. Uh, for this trick to work, you can put all your line layers in one folder, and that's good. But what helps me to do flat coloring very quickly is something called selection source. And I actually don't know what program either of you guys are running to draw, but there's a pretty good chance that you've got some kind of analog function here. And what selection source does is it influences how this magic wand tool works. And the magic wand tool normally, like, it'll select everything, and that's not useful at all. But if I have a selection source, it tells the magic wand tool what to work with. If I have it set to one specific layer, then it'll only think about that one specific layer. But if you have it set to an entire folder, it'll take that entire folder into account. But what the magic wand tool does is it selects everything inside of a group of lines. And if I select everything, in this figure, then I can just do my flat colors very quickly by bucket tooling, by using the bucket tool to just fill in the blocks, to make the colors happen. One thing that kind of goes wrong here is you see there's a few areas that the magic wand tool did not select, and there's a few ways to fix that. You can fix that yourself by either just clicking little areas again with the magic wand tool until things are all selected. There's a select tool inside that is just a brush that selects things, that makes a selection area happen. Or one way that I've figured out recently that somebody told me was if you select everything outside of the figure, you usually have a lot less of those little areas to worry about. You might have one or two somewhere, and you do have to, make sure about that. But what you do once you have everything outside the figure selected, you can invert the selection, and then it just makes everything that was not selected selected, and makes everything that was selected unselected. So what this does for me now is I have everything inside the head is selected, and I can just color everything one color. Sai is a very, very good drawing program. It's not the only one I've used. I used Sai, and I've used Photoshop a little bit, but Photoshop is just so unintuitive for me. I can't really figure it out. Mostly how brushes work and how, I don't know, I had plenty of problems with that. But everything in Sai is just laid out exactly where I need it. I know where to go for things. It's just great. The only thing that I've ever really used Photoshop for since I moved over to Sai is if I need text on images. Photoshop has a text tool, and I kind of use that. But Sai 2 is coming out pretty soon. I think it's actually out in beta already, and that's going to have a text tool in it, as well as built-in rulers and grid tools and perspective line tools, and it's basically going to be the best thing ever. And I really can't wait. Because right now I have to, if I want a grid so I can get lines straight, or if I want a perspective tool, then I have another program that I use for those things. And I can link that to you guys if you guys are interested in that. This is not the color that Mayor Mare is supposed to be. That's closer. So really I'm going to I'm going to go ahead and do the flat colors, just kind of lay them in real quick. I'm going to be doing this by memory, so chances are I'm going to be getting stuff wrong, but Brown horse, white hair. That's what you need to know. One thing about, characters in general with multicolored hair, uh, is the whole selection source thing. Uh, right now I have just this area blocked off, just her hair. So if I try to color outside of it, that does not work because the hair is all I've got selected. So, whoops. So that saves me a lot of headaches, is having the appropriate things selected when I need to do colors like this. And there are things like, with the way I do eyes, I usually do not enclose them at the bottom, which maybe I will this time just to be different. At least on this part. But uh, there's things when I draw that I can't just cheat around. I probably could cheat around if I really, really wanted to, but I kind of like the way things look when I do them, so I'm not going to. So when it comes to eyes, I just have to color them in normally. No cheats, no tools, no gods, no masters. And that takes a little bit longer, but if that's all I have to do is the eyes, then that still goes by pretty quickly. Bonk, bonk. Whoops. And like I was talking about earlier with the stripes in the hair, right now I've just got her eyes selected. So when I'm doing the gradient for her eyes, I don't have to worry about accidentally coloring in the eyeballs or in the coat around the eyes. All I have to worry about is the actual irises of the eyes themselves. That saves me a lot of headache too. Actually, let's not put that in yet. So hey, check it out. We've got a fully colored horse. But this isn't where we want to stop because that's boring. What I do is I'm because words. We want to make the picture look dark because that's the whole point of the thing. So I add a layer on top of all the colors, set it to multiply, and just pick a color that I want it to be, and just bucket tool. Wow, that's not very dark at all. That's it's probably not very dark because I don't really have much of a background. Yeah, that actually helps a lot. Okay, so now she's in the dark. She can't see anything. She also can't see anything because she doesn't have her glasses on. But what we want to do is we want a light source. We want something to illuminate the picture. So I just add another layer right on top of the flat colors, and I make it a clipping group, which does basically the same thing as the selection source did. It tells this layer what I want to be on it, and that since I've clipped it to the colors layer, this layer knows that all I want to do is color on top of the color layer. So if I try to color around things, you see that It's really only coming on top of the color layer. But there's a couple of ways to do this. I usually set my layer mode to luminosity because luminosity, whoops, luminosity is kind of a cheating way of. Uh, Let me try to explain this. I don't know exactly how how it works, but what it's supposed to do is it adds light to a picture in whatever color you choose over here. Uh, I actually don't think I want this the way it is. We'll have to figure something out. But for now, I'm just going to lay color down. What if we did this? Or something. Okay. We'll have the light coming from over on this side. And kind of the thing to keep in mind here is that this is a 2D representation of a 3D figure. So there's going to be places where the light is going to touch easily and places where the light is not going to be able to touch easily. And half the fun of shading things is figuring out where the light is and is not going to be. And that's something I'm still working on a lot myself. That's something I'm starting to get pretty good at, I'd say. But it's pretty easy on horses because, ponies are very round. They have a lot of circles to them. And that makes figuring things out lighting-wise pretty easy because it's just everything is balls. Except when it's not, I guess. I'm calling ponies everywhere fat. They all need to go on diets. I guess I'm going to change the position of the light source just a little bit. Kind of the hardest part for me doing this is the snout, because I understand how it's supposed to come out. I understand the basic shapes. There's the circle for the thing, and then there's basically a three-dimensional box coming out of it with kind of rounded edges. And if your light source is coming from over here, light will hit this side of the box. It won't hit these two sides quite as much, and it won't hit the two far sides of the box barely at all. And that's a thing that I don't see many artists in the pony fandom, at least, do very well. I'm sure there's plenty of people that do, and I'm sure that the people who do it kind of just, pass over me. Because this is a thing that, when it's done right, should be, I don't want to say unnoticeable, but it should be so natural looking that it doesn't draw so much attention to itself. So I'm sure I've seen plenty of people do it correctly, but when they do it correctly, it's just my brain says, oh yeah, that's how light works, and it doesn't give it a second thought. But when I see people do it incorrectly, I'm like, wow, that's not how things work. Why did you do it that way? And that does stick out to me. Kind of a fun thing about lighting is that sometimes the shape that you're trying to depict doesn't really make a whole lot of sense until you throw light onto it. Like when I remember there was a time when I started when I had to draw a portrait of a famous celebrity or something for some kind of challenge that I was doing, and I did the sketch and the line art for the face, and it didn't look a thing like him. But then I put the shading on, or it was still just a sketch, I guess. But I kind of put hatching lines to denote shading, and once I started doing that, it started really looking like the person I was trying to make it look like. So here, I've kind of got a weird little droopy shape thing. But I can kind of tell your brain now where the shape is going because of where the light is hitting and where the light is not hitting. And I think that's way cool when I can do it right. I think it's absolute garbage when I'm having trouble with it. So I've kind of got a blank space here, because there are two types of shadows, and I think the first kind is called just form shadows, and that's just shadows where where the light hits normally because of the shape of what you're drawing. Like the fact that light is hitting here and light is not hitting here is because her head is round. That would be a form shadow. The fact that light does not hit here is because this ear is in the way, and that's called a cast shadow because the ear is casting a shadow. That's another thing that you can try and keep in mind to make your lighting really pop. Is if something is in the way, you gotta cast a shadow, and that can make things look really dynamic, or really dumb if you can't do it right. Which sometimes I don't do it very well, but it's learning. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm talking about, Chibi, is that before the lighting, it didn't look like a whole lot. Honestly, it just looks like lumps. But with the lighting on it, it looks like it's got an actual form to it. And it's basically just it's a lot better to look at, and it's a lot more fun for me to try and draw. Because it's a pretty big challenge for me still, is figuring out what's what. And challenges are fun. Yeah, that's kind of it. Maybe. Actually, we've got the light kind of coming in from the top, so this should probably actually be lit all the way through too. But actually, when I'm doing these things on my own, I guess I don't really put too much stock into making them look nice, because this is cell shading right now, and the definition of cell shading is that there are hard lines between light and shadow. Like, you can tell that this part has no lighting on it and this part does, and there's a hard line between the two. And that's definitely easy to do, well, easier, but that's also not really how light works most of the time. So when I'm figuring these things out, usually I'll do cell shading to figure out where light should and should not be hitting. Excuse me. And then I will use a blending tool to kind of soften the edges. And one thing that's worth noting is I mentioned the two different types of shadows earlier. There's the form shadows and the cast shadows, and one interesting thing about them, or difference between them, I suppose, is that cast shadows cast hard shadows, especially when they cast when they're casting a shadow on something very close to them. Light doesn't have a whole lot of chance to bend around the form, and that creates a very hard shadow. So when your form shadows, however, do not, especially like the rounder the object, like we're working with a pony head here, so that's very, very round. Uh, you know, there's going to be a bigger gradient there between the light and the dark. Whereas the cast shadow up here, there's going to be basically nothing. You might do just a little bit of something to make it not look like garbage, but for all intents and purposes, it shouldn't be. There you should be able to tell the difference between the two types of shadows. We actually want to erase some of this, I think. Okay, so we kind of more or less have the light. And that's general just lighting stuff. You were asking specifically about how I do lighting in dark situations, and really the key there is just to make things dark. And I think I kind of screwed the pooch over here. Let's fiddle with layers and see what goes on. Oops. Yeah, okay, that looks a lot more like I was wanting it to be. It's a lot messier now because it's more in the light. Or it's just more noticeable. But I can fix the little areas I messed up on pretty easily, I hope. Yeah. But now it pops out a whole lot more. And depending on what the light source is and how far or close away it is to the person, depends on how bright you want this luminosity layer to be. Like if she was in a dark room and the only light is a candle over to the side here, the candle doesn't exactly give off a whole lot of light. This is still messing with me. Yeah. The candle's not going to give a whole lot of light. So, it's going to be obvious what's going to be lit and what isn't, but, it's a very low light. Now, if there was a flashlight shining on her, then, that's a lot more yellow. That looks like, a very strong light is being thrown on her. But it really depends on the strength of this luminosity layer, what kind of mood you're going to create. And if you decide, like say, we're going to go a little bit weird and make it a blue candle, you don't have to completely redo the entire thing. You can hit preserve opacity over here. Or actually, we're going to do this a different way. Paint Tool Psi has ways you can just kind of mess with the color of an entire thing. It has just a menu where you can do that. So right now I just made everything blue, so it looks like moonlight through the window or something. And if I wanted to, I could even make whoops, let's not go quite full. We can do something like this to look like actual light is shining on it. Yeah, this makes for a really cozy looking image. This is what I did with the Luna thing that I did really recently. By the way, that's kind of how I did the stuff there. And both of you are patrons on my Patreon account, and so I have that sci file loaded onto my Patreon account, so you can actually download that yourself and, pardon me, and look at how I accomplished what I accomplished there. Because sometimes those kind of things aren't terribly obvious when you're just looking at the finished result, and sometimes it's better just to look at the actual project file. One thing I want to talk about is textures. This is more or less anime hair is what I'm drawing. And anime hair is kind of, as a rule, I guess, very, very shiny. So, shininess is just another way of figuring out how much light a thing reflects. So, hair, at least the way I'm drawing it, is going to reflect a whole lot of light. So whatever light is hitting it, there's going to be a lot of, you're going to see a lot of that light here. And the squiggles are kind of to help make things look like, they're individual strands of hair instead of just one big cartoony block. Which, if you're interested in drawing one big cartoony block of hair, then, Godspeed. But I'm not. But eyeballs are also a very shiny surface. They're going to take a lot of the light that they take in, and they're going to reflect a lot of it. So basically, there's a lot of white there. Fur and pony coats, I guess, especially in this case, are not very shiny. They're not going to really reflect a whole lot of stuff. If the light source is especially strong, they might. They probably would, I guess. But, that's not going to be a thing you're really going to see. Polished wood would be very shiny. Rubber and latex and stuff would be very shiny. Glass is very shiny. Carpet is not shiny. I don't know. Human skin is not necessarily very shiny unless it's wet or oily or something. And even then, I guess that means that it's the water or the oil that's shiny, not necessarily the skin. But that's a pet peeve of mine, actually, since I got myself talking about it, is people who draw skin like it's the shiniest thing ever, and they've just got, shine marks on every single joint and every little part of the body, and it's just kind of gross looking. It's not a thing I like, personally. But again, if that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. That's art. You're allowed to do what you want to do. And I'm just allowed to not like it. But, I don't know. I guess that's about all I can think of here. Were there any questions about coloring or shady? Oh yeah, the ultra shiny boobs. And I guess, Chibi, I'll admit to not having seen a whole lot of breasts in my lifetime, but the ones that I have seen aren't really made of a different texture from the rest of the body. And I know why people do that. People make the breasts ultra shiny to draw attention to them, and that's perfectly acceptable, I suppose. But I don't know if it's acceptable. It makes sense. I can understand why people do that. It helps set them apart from the rest of the body, and that's great. But I'd also say if you're going to be drawing furry characters, Maniko, they're kind of furry all over, and I don't know if their boobs should be especially shiny. Unless you're drawing, lizards or something. lizards don't have fur, and scales are definitely allowed to be shiny if you want them to be. But if you're drawing lizards, then you're probably going to be making a whole lot of people angry if you give your lizards boobs. So, shrug. I'm definitely guilty of that once or twice. But, I don't know. I'm not really seeing anything else to talk about unless there's anything I've missed or just any subjects that have come up while I'm talking that you guys want me to cover real quick. Oh. Well, that's good to hear that this wasn't a complete waste of time then. I'm always kind of a little nervous when I do these things to figure out if I actually know what I think I know. But I think I. Ooh, excuse me. I think I kind of do. Oh, yes. Well, if there are no more questions, I'm probably going to go ahead and cut the stream here. So I will catch you guys later. Hope this helps. And I guess if you have any questions at any other point, you both know where to find me. Oh yeah, I want to see the doodles after I cut the stream. That's going to be cool. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and stop the stream. Thank you guys for coming, and see you all next time.